Since the Democrats took power of both the House and the Senate in January of this year, I've spent a lot of time on the road talking to Americans. Most that I talk to are very frustrated with the war in Iraq. I sat down today with Senator Sanders to discuss the war in Iraq and the way that Congress is handling it. With all this happening, you have the war in Iraq, a lot of Americans very upset. Why is it that it seems like the Democrats in Congress cannot get anything done?
As an independent working with the Democrats, they have gotten some things done. So it's not like they haven't done anything. The first problem, objective problem, is it takes 60 votes to end a filibuster. And people say, well, why haven't you stopped the war? We haven't even voted on the war. What we have voted on, trying to get 60 votes, is to give us a vote on ending the war. There has not been a vote on ending the war.
How about not sending the supplementals to the floor? A recent ABC Washington Post poll said that more than 51% of Americans are in favor of cutting off funding. So why send it to the floor?
Well,
don't Democrats have that power?
You have that power, but you're certainly not going to have that support within the Democratic caucus. So it's not fair to say Democrats haven't done anything. It is fair to say that given the huge numbers of problems that we face, they have not been as aggressive as they should be. It is fair to say that given the power of big money, the Democrats have not yet begun to stand up to big money interest to protect the middle class and working families. That is fair to say. And the answer to that is that the Democratic Party is not a progressive party. It is a centrist party with some progressives, some conservatives. Right now in America, money is what dictates public policy. Under the Republicans, everything was done for big money, but we would be naive not to believe that money plays a role today.
What should the American public, knowing that they're so against the war, what should they be expecting from the Democratic Party at this point? Are we just to expect the Democrats to hedge their bets and wait for 2008, or what's
Well, I don't
happening?
think it's a hedging your bets. I mean, I think within the Democratic Party, there are those of us who are very strongly against the war. There are people, in fact, who had voted for the war. There are people who are somewhat in the middle. Within the Republican Party, you only have a small handful, Chuck Hagel of Nebraska being one, and very few others, who are prepared to say this war has been a disaster, let's end it. So the first task that we have a multiplicity of tasks in front of us. Certainly number one is to pay a lot of attention to this election and make sure that those Republicans who support the president on the war are not reelected. That's simple.
But between now and 2008, I mean, the American public is overwhelmingly against the war. There's now more than half in favor of cutting off funding. What can the American public expect between now and 2008? Are they just waiting for...
I'm not the majority lead here. I don't know. I can tell you that I have worked with people like Russ Feingold to support the very strongest legislation that we can to end the funding and bring the troops home.
And what happened with the timetables we saw earlier this summer? Now
timetables passed. It passed. That's what was vetoed by the president. I mean, so when you say, has anything happened? Yeah, actually, an effort to bring the troops home was passed.
But then that was vetoed, and now we're at just giving 3 months at a time.
But that was vetoed. Mm-hmm. And you know what? The guy in the White House hasn't changed. He is still the president of the United States. And if that were passed tomorrow, it would be vetoed again. Now, your question might then be, well, maybe it should be passed again. And maybe we should ask them to veto it. And maybe if the Republicans want to filibuster as they will, let them filibuster. And let's bring that issue onto the floor. And if we have to go 24 hours a day debating the war, let's do that. You know what? I think that that's a good idea. I am prepared to do that.
So you would be in favor of...
I would. And by the way, there's a rationale for that too. What Harry Reid will tell you is, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. But you know what? We're not going to pass an education bill. We're not going to pass a children's health insurance program. You're not going to pass an energy bill. You're not going to pass the global warming bill if that happens. Well, I mean, and there's truth to that as well. But I myself think that there are 24 hours to the day. I think that the war in Iraq is important enough so that we say to our Republican colleagues, you want to filibuster? Here's the microphone. We'll be here. And you want to go 24 hours? That's good. You want to go 48 hours? That's good. Let the American people understand what's happening. You tell the American people why you don't want to end this outrageous war, and let's have that out. I'm for that.
You were opposing Bush's nomination for Attorney General. Why is that?
To my mind, we want an Attorney General not only who understands that torture is not what America is about, but equally important, understands that the president cannot simply claim that he's fighting terrorism and give the president all of the powers that this president wants. We need an attorney general, in fact, who will educate the President of the United States about the Constitution, because clearly this president doesn't understand it. Based on the responses that I heard from Judge Mukasey before the Senate Judiciary Committee, I don't think he's that guy.
The climate change bill, which is one of the things that you're working on, this is, from what I understand, the first time that the Senate's going to take up climate change, and you're helping to author that.
Where we are right now is that the subcommittee that I'm on, they have introduced legislation which is better than other legislations in terms of cap and trade, in terms of getting industries to cut back on their carbon emissions. That's the good news. The bad news is it doesn't go as far as it should in terms of the degree to which it cuts emissions, to the degree that which allows loopholes for people to not cut emissions. And also what concerns me is we're dealing over a 40-year period with some $3.5 trillion. And even in Washington, that's a lot of money. Mm-hmm. What concerns me is that money is not being allocated to the degree that I want to see it to energy efficiency, nor is it being allocated toward the potential of solar energy, wind energy, and other types of sustainable energy. Quite the contrary. Many hundreds of billions of dollars are targeted for so-called clean coal. Money is going to the automobile industry without the kind of demands on that industry to give us the kind of cause that we need. So there's a lot of corporate welfare in that bill that concerns me very much.
You bring up corporate welfare, and you talk a lot about the coal and the automotive industries. How much does that lobby have to do with how much corporate welfare gets spent on that? Is that really very strong here in Washington?
Where do you think it comes from? Do you think somebody said, see, we'll give zero money for solar energy, despite the fact that all over Europe that's exploding, doing really well. Zero money for wind, despite the fact that's the fastest growing new source of energy in the world. We're not going to carve out any money for those. But coal, don't you hear people yelling and screaming about how much they think coal is the solution? Well, here on Capitol Hill you do, because there are large numbers of lobbyists, and it's a very powerful industry, oil industry. Automobile industry, very, very powerful. We give tax breaks to billionaires, and we don't fund the needs of children in terms of health care. That's because of the power of big money and their lobbyists. That is the fundamental reality of Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm. And I want to wrap up by talking about something that I see when I travel all over the country, which is a frustrated American public. What can the average American do that doesn't want to wait for the 2008 election?
I think you're going to have to take a hard look in trying to understand why things happen and how you can change it. And jumping up and down and saying, oh, I'm just disgusted, I'm burned out, I'm giving up on the process, it's really not good enough. All right? I mean, just back it up for a moment. Do you know, when I was growing up as a kid, in the southern part of this country, black kids went to separate schools, and black people couldn't drink from a white-only drinking fountain. Okay? It took years and years of struggle. It took people dying to make that happen. It's an enormous struggle for women to get the right to vote, to raise consciousness on environmental issues so that we begin to have some environmental legislation. If you are a serious person about politics, it's not just the war in Iraq or Bush's desire to go to war in Iran. There are a whole lot of issues over there. It is a fact that you have a government which is owned and controlled primarily by big money interest. And if you're serious about that, you got to work on it. And you know what? The solution is not going to come tomorrow. So it means being involved in the deepest sense in the political process, which, by the way, does not just mean only voting every 2 years or every 4 years. It means organizing. It means educating. It means addressing the issue of corporate control over the media. And that's what we got to think about. What you have is a nation increasingly owned by fewer and fewer people who use their wealth, not just to buy big yachts, that's the least of the problem. They use their money to buy politicians, to buy media, to influence what other people think. Those are some of the issues that we have got to address. And the solutions are not going to happen tomorrow. But we need a strong grassroots movement, because I think the vast majority of the people want to see fundamental changes take place in Washington, D.C., and they want us to stand up to these very powerful forces who represent a very small number of people.
With a strong desire for change amongst the American people and a presidential election now a year away, Senator Sanders believes the power still rests with the American people. Whether it's through the election or grassroots activism, the power is still with them. This has been Geoff Millard reporting from Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C.